Hey, what's up? Welcome back to another tutorial from PH Studios. This is an After Effects tutorial. It's a little bit different than what we've done before. We've done Photoshop and X&A, pretty much primarily X&A, but we're going to dive into some Photoshop or After Effects stuff too. So the first tutorial of the series, of any series, I like to do that involves a user interface like Photoshop, and we also did GarageBand and things like that. I like to go through the interface, so you don't really learn that much information on the first one other than where things are located. So that's what I'm going to do in the very first tutorial, is just give you an overview on what you see here. And my view might be a little bit different since I have had an open project many times before. So some of the settings are a little bit different than what your initial settings are, and things like that. Alright, so let's walk through this. The initial screen you should see, you should have a welcome screen that's in the center of this. I can't bring that back, I don't think. No. Okay, so you should see a welcome screen, your recent project list, tip of the day, things like that. You can close that out, and then you should see what I see. Okay, now on the left side, the far left side, you have a project overview. These are the list of your compositions, list of your pictures, list of your music files, list of anything that's related to your project in here. List of your solids, and I'll discuss what those things mean later on. So they will be right here. You can see an overview on, if you select a single file in here, you can see a little picture of it and some stats, and I'll show you that in a recent project that I converted over, because we'll be doing that in like tutorial 4 or 5. Below here is a composition settings, composition view, that you can see what individual layers are in that single composition. If you use Photoshop, a composition is, think of a composition as like a folder. It's more advanced than that, but if you can think of it as like a folder that you made in Photoshop. So in the folder, you can do additional blending options for that single folder that affects every file. You can do the same thing with the composition. You can do additional blending options and additional effects for that composition that affects every layer in there. And you have to enable the switch sometimes, which I'll show you what that does as well. And these are all the files, all the keyframes are on the right side. The amount of time it is, it'll be a rectangle, a big long rectangle, depending on how long the single layer is, and things like that. Now, since I already rendered stuff out a few times, I have a render queue down here. We can get to the render queue later on, and I'll discuss that later, but it's there, and when we do our first tutorial, which is the next one, I'll discuss how to get to the render queue. Okay, so that's what the bottom view looks like. You can change these around if you want, but I like the default. Back up to the project section, there's some settings here. I'll discuss what these mean later on. Of course, that one's a trash. You can select the file in here and delete it if you want to. Okay, so now let's walk over and look at the right side. Right side is the info, where my cursor is. You see X and Y being updated, what the RGBA value is of that. And then there's an audio section here. We can modify the dB and things like that. There's a preview that is default like this. If you scroll up on the preview, I like to have it like this. I know that's a little bit small for the tutorial because I'm doing it at 720p, but my regular resolution is 1080 resolution, so that's perfect for the regular resolution. So I'll put it back to the way it was before. But that is a RAM preview that allows you to preview the video clip without encoding it, and it does it using the RAM. So the more RAM you have, the more stuff you can preview, the more quality you can use, and the better frame rate you can do in without skipping a whole bunch of frames. Okay, I'll discuss that later on as well. The character, you can set your font, whatever font you want to do, what type of effects, what the color is. If you want a 77 pixel font, the leading and things like that. Just whatever font stuff you found, you can find here. Effects and presets, we'll discuss that in a later tutorial, that we can do certain effects for the audio. We can delay the audio, and certain effects we can drag over to the single layer or the whole composition. We can blur it out by doing these sort of presets here, or we can go to the effect here and look at all these that we can do: audio, blur and sharpen, and things like that. Paragraph, it's the same thing as a text. We can set left justified, center right justified, and justify just last left, justify last centered, justify last right, and completely justified, and just things like that. We can indent, and yeah. So all the text effects, and things like that are on the right side by default. The effects are on the right side. The RAM preview is on the right side. The information's on the right side, and the audio is on the right side. Alright, so now let me open, we're not going to do the tutorial yet, but let me just open one of the first tutorials we will be doing. And this is the hyperspace effect that we've seen in the YouTube, and I posted that on the forums like a year and a half ago or so. So it's just 4 or 5 particle systems combined together to create a nice sort of hyperspace looking effect. Now, the RAM preview, I'm going to discuss the RAM preview a little bit. Yeah, push that up, push the effects down a little bit. Okay. So the RAM preview, we can set the frame rate, we can set it to skip a certain amount of frames. So it encodes 1 frame and it skips 5. We can set a resolution to auto. I can set it to full, half, third, or a quarter. Now, I'm probably going way in too deep about this, as I probably should for the first tutorial. But one thing that is very important, when you're doing your project, when you want to see it before you encode it, I would turn off any motion blurs, because motion blurs kill the RAM preview time. So I'll set it to half, and I turned off all the motion blurs, and then I'll press this little button here that says RAM preview. So I'll do that, and it'll automatically encode the frames, and it's half quality, so it doesn't look as good, but you can see it encoding, and it's pretty fast, and then it will encode the entire thing. Once it's done, it'll replay it. So now that was without motion blur. Now let me turn on motion blur. And it's a good idea if you do this multiple times. I like to go to Edit, Purge, All. So that deletes all your previous RAM usage, and then you can just start over from scratch. Because sometimes it gets a little confused. It will forget this frame, and then your RAM preview doesn't look as good, and things like that. Now it probably got decreased 2 seconds, but I'm also on half resolution, and I'm on a lower resolution than the entire project was. So you can't really see the motion blur too well on half. So let me turn it on full. Let me go to Edit, Purge, All, and do that again. And full also kills it. You see it's taking way too long to do a single frame. 1 to 2, 3 frames sometimes. It takes a lot longer to do full and a motion blur. So I'm not going to play that. You can stop at any time and it'll automatically loop how far you got. Okay, so like I said, here is we're looking inside the composition. So here, all this composition is 5 particle layers. that we can modify, do whatever we want. We can move it left, move it right, things like that. We can modify it. I'm going to set this to half as well. We can modify them all, we can modify them one, and things like that. The render queue, as you see, I have a hyperspace effect, hyperspace effect. I already rendered these out long ago. Yeah, these were in March 1st, 2009. So last time I rendered this project out was in March 1st, 2009. And up here, you saw the project view that has two compositions and all my solids. Now, solid is, you can have a null object, a adjustment layer, a single black solid, or all your particles. And if you're gonna do any sort of effects that are standalone, like a particle system or like a lens flare, you want to generate a new solid, which is just a single, however dimensions you want it to be, or the entire comp size, but it's a single color. Now you can modify that to like a ramp, doing a gradient thing, and you can do like lens flares or particle systems, but we usually start with a single color rectangle it's called a layer new solid. Okay, so first tutorial, all your tools are up here. We can grab the view. If we scroll back, this is changing the view, not the layers. So this is if we scroll in here, we can just change the view. Now we're looking at it. We're not moving the layers. To move the layers, we do this. Now we're moving that single particle system that's right there. We just move that. So that's grabbing the view, so we can just move the entire project around. And we can zoom in really close if we want to modify something up here and things like that. Zoom in, zoom in, zoom in, things like that. A camera, I don't have a camera, so really can't demonstrate that too much. We'll get into all these different tools later on. We can create a rectangle, and we can create using a pen tool like we can on Photoshop, just create a shape, and we can create a text. If I can spell hello. Hello, first tutorial. Now we can move that around and bring that up size. Hold shift to scale it properly. So hello, first tutorial. And we can brush, things like that. So we'll get into all these things later on in the series. But for the first tutorial, all your tools are default. These are the default. I'm Workspace Standard. So default, all your tools are up here. Your project overview, every file, every solid, every composition, every audio file, everything that's related to your project that is used or not used, you just dragged in here, is in your project overview. Now you can click this open, or that'll create a new folder. We can open a new file, or we can double click this, or we can simply do a drag and drop directly on here. That's how we get a new one. Now the effects palette we'll get into later on. As you see, this is particles layer 2. So we have a particle world. This is built into the complete full version of the Adobe After Effects. It's not available in the trial, but it is available for free on the full version after you activate it. I don't know if that's changed in the CS5. I know in CS4 it was not available on the trial. So CC Particle World, Radial Blur, and then Hue and Saturation. We did a glow, and all that combined is what we see for this single particle system. Okay, so next tutorial we'll discuss a simple keyframing and doing some sort of stuff with that. We'll keyframe the position, we'll keyframe the scale, we'll keyframe the opacity, and things like that. It's just a whole tutorial dedicated to keyframing. So I hope to see you next time.